Hello and welcome to The Nation, your platform for thought-provoking conversations with global leaders shaping the world's future. I'm Jessy, Chahal, and today we have the distinct honor of sitting down with a distinguished guest whose diplomatic expertise has played a pivotal role in strengthening international relations. Today we indulge in a captivating chat reflecting his remarkable tenure here in Malaysia since 2021 and hope to explore milestones, challenges and shared achievements that have shaped the bilateral relations between the nations. His Excellency Brian McFeeters, the United States Ambassador to Malaysia, joins me. Your Excellency, welcome.
Thank you. Terima kasih. Yeah,
it's good to have you here. Yeah, I of course understand that you can converse in Bahasa as well, but we won't put you on the spot today.
Okay.
Instead, we will, of course, visit some of the highs and lows of your time here in Malaysia. Let's start with some key accomplishments during your time in Malaysia.
I think it's been a great time to be ambassador here in Malaysia. I started in February 2021, which was about the time that the Biden administration started in Washington. And you know, the directions from Washington to all ambassadors, including myself, were go out and strengthen our partnerships with friends, allies, and partners. And we consider Malaysia a very strong partner. So based on that, we've been working across. We have these three main dimensions, which with a lot of subparts to them. But we work on the economic side, and I'm glad to talk about that. Investment and trade, which has really recovered, and we have a strong security relationship with the military, but also with the MMEA, the Maritime Enforcement Agency, and also with police. So that's across the board. And then we have a strong people-to-people relationship where we try to take leading Malaysians, send them to the U.S. for exchange programs for education, send Americans here, just make as many of those ties as we can. And all of those have been a lot of fun for me to participate in.
Particularly, in which area do you think or do you feel that there has been rapid advancement or achievement?
I think the thing that really jumps out is on the economic side. My staff was just pulling together numbers a few days ago, and they said that in 2022 and 2023, so only an 18-month period, there's been 100 billion in new U.S. investment pledged from Malaysia. It's all just been announced, so it's going to be happening. But that's a very significant figure. It's continuing in the areas that the U.S. has had strength in, which is the electronic sector, semiconductor sector. But it's also in data centers, which is a big new growth area. It's more in health, health items like pharmaceuticals and medical devices. So I think that's the biggest single change is U.S. investment really coming in strong into Malaysia. And that's good for the United States because Malaysia, we found out during COVID, Malaysia is a key part of the world supply chain. A lot of U.S. factories depend directly on something made in Malaysia. So we have this mutually beneficial U.S. invests in Malaysia, creates semiconductors and other products that go back to the U.S. and become part of other, U.S. cars and things like that. So very mutually beneficial economic relationship that I've seen develop.
2020, 2021, a hard time for everyone across the globe. It was also the time that you arrived here in Malaysia. How would you describe some of the experiences then versus now? And moving forward, what are some of your thoughts on Malaysia's prospects for the future?
2020, 2021 was difficult for everybody. I think everybody had to experience COVID one place or another. When I arrived here in February of 2021, Malaysia was actually in a better condition than the United States. We were much more sort of locked down and limited in the United States. So when I first got to Malaysia, we were able to go out to the restaurant for the first time in 7 months and things like that. But then, of course, Malaysia went through its own difficult period later in 2021. I was very glad to have the cooperation with the government of Malaysia at that time. Malaysia ended up being one of the strongest, vaccination countries in the world in terms of the percentage of people vaccinated. The United States played a small part in that, but at a critical moment, we were able to provide 1 million doses of COVID vaccine. So that was a high point for me, being able to receive those.
Right, Pfizer vaccine.
It was Pfizer vaccine, donation. So that was we're very proud to be part of that. I think that if you talk about prospects, I think what we saw from Malaysia was no country was ready for COVID. Every country had to face it. Malaysia faced it well, vaccinated their population, and has come out strong on the other side. The economy has recovered, and I think U.S. companies are saying that and seeing that and saying let's do more in Malaysia.
Back in those few years, what would you say really stood out in terms of understanding Malaysians and their resilience, if you would?
You know, it was interesting to see the differences. In the United States, we never had the kind of sort of complete lockdowns that you had in Malaysia. We had restrictions on, you know, you couldn't go to restaurants. There are certain places you couldn't go, but there was never sort of an effort to say people have to stay home.
Right.
So in Malaysia, in some cases, Malaysia was, I think, more strict than the United States, and consequently probably had a lower rate of COVID than we did in the United States. Right? There's a relationship between the two. But I think what's more interesting is the way that Malaysia was able to persuade, I forget the number, but it's something like 90% of the population became vaccinated. We never quite reached that level in the United States because there was skepticism and it became politicized and all that. So I think what we saw in Malaysia was a government that was able to face an unprecedented challenge, get organized with some international assistance, but not a lot. Frankly, it was mainly the government of Malaysia doing it. So I think we saw the strengths of the Malaysian system. You know, everything from, you know, the ability to make sure that you know, some of the foreign workers got vaccinated, even though they might be afraid of being deported, but there was an assurance that you won't be deported, just come get vaccinated. Things like that made a difference.
You mentioned economic ties were strengthened as well in terms of investment and trade. What potential do you see here on after your departure between both nations?
You always have to look ahead. You know, I have new colleagues arriving at the embassy just about the time I'm getting ready to leave. And your question is right. That's the way we talk. We all say, like, what's next? What are we going to do in the next 6 months? So if I just look at the next few months, we have a number of important things going on. We're very grateful that Malaysia has agreed to host the October negotiating round of IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Mm-hmm. That's a different kind of agreement. It's looking at 21st century issues in the areas of, you know, how do you create a clean economy with more renewable energy? How do you improve supply chains so that we don't have another kind of breakdown of the supply chains?
Right.
How do you attack corruption, which is a very difficult issue? Things that will help all the countries improve their investment climates and look better. So Malaysia has agreed to host that round in October, and that's particularly important because by November of this year, we're having the APEC Leaders Summit. Hopefully Prime Minister Anwar will be there as well as others. And that's to announce some results. So Malaysia is playing a very big part in that. I think that's one of the big things. But we work across all dimensions of our relationship. On the security side, we just had a large CRIS strike exercise up in Kelantan with thousands of people on both sides participating. We have 11 of those kind of exercises, military exercises with Malaysia each year, and Malaysia participates in five multilateral exercises. So there's always something going on in terms of our, the aspects of our relationship.
Right. Economic security and people-to-people was
Right.
what you shared earlier.
Right.
Going back to security, in what areas could there be more sort of ventures together?
So on the security side, I served in Malaysia 12 years ago, and I saw the relationship at that time. Since then, it's expanded quite a bit. I think over the last 4 years, the U.S. has provided a significant amount of equipment that Malaysia requested in terms of maritime security. Right. So I think Malaysia issued a white paper. I think it was in 2020 that basically said, we're a maritime country. Let's look at our maritime.
Right.
Let's look at our maritime environment more carefully. And the United States stepped up to that. So we provided a number of things like UAVs, drones that fly in the sky without a pilot and then can help survey the maritime domain, and radar and other things that are helping in that area. Refurbishment of planes to make them better for Malaysia to better kind of control and survey its maritime area. So that's something that we want to do. But everything we do is basically something that the Malaysian government has asked us to do so that Malaysia can better defend its own sovereignty and exploit its own resources. Right. So everything we do goes to the Malaysian government and they come back and say they want it.
Right. Thank you for that. I put you in a bit of a spot here now in terms of bringing up US-China and that ongoing conflict. Where do you see this conflict going? And also, how should Malaysia stand, or what stand could Malaysia perhaps take? Because Malaysia's aim is to stay neutral.
Right. Yeah. Maybe starting with the second point first. One of the points that our Secretary of State and my boss, the Assistant Secretary of State, make everywhere they go is the United States is not asking any country to choose. In Malaysia's case, Malaysia has a strong and beneficial trade relationship with China. That's helped Malaysia, advance economically. There's no denying that, and there's no request to change that. What we've said is each country needs to make its own decisions about how it defends its sovereignty and defends its maritime domain. What we're doing on our side is we're making clear that we want the status quo to remain what it is. We want the South China Sea to be open to all parties for commerce, a tremendous, trillions of dollars worth of commerce go through the South China Sea. We think it should just remain that way. It's been an open waterway for centuries, and it should remain that way. And the same way with Taiwan. The status quo, we have a one China policy, but it depends on the status quo in Taiwan being maintained. And we've said that we want that status quo to be maintained. We want no change in that.
Okay. So in summary, what would that be?
In summary, it would be just preservation of the status quo, which is peaceful. There's threats, but it is largely peaceful in the South China Sea and across the Taiwan Straits, and we want that to remain.
Right. It's time for a quick breather. We will take a break and be back having this conversation on The Nation with His Excellency Brian McFeeters, the United States Ambassador to Malaysia. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching The Nation with me, Jessy Chahal, and in the studio is His Excellency Brian McFeeters, the United States Ambassador to Malaysia. This is your farewell interview, and you will leave Malaysian shores by August this year. During your time so far, what would you say, reflecting, were some of the most significant challenges in terms of the hardships, COVID aside, especially in hoping or trying to advance U.S. interests, and how did you address them from a diplomatic standpoint?
One of the areas that I'm proud of that our team at the embassy has done, we have an astonishing team of professionals in a lot of areas. And one of the areas that we've really been able to focus on well is climate crisis, climate change. I think when I first got here 2.5 years ago, there was a sense that maybe the Malaysian public really wasn't as, attuned to climate change. And then, by the way, the U.S. public still has its issues on that. But over the 2 years, I've seen both the Malaysian public becoming more, there's more coverage of climate crisis issues. And more significantly, the current Malaysian government has done a lot. The Minister of Economy recently announced a very ambitious plan that really covers a lot of the areas that we talked about. I'd like to think that the United States played a small part in that. We've worked on this issue a lot. We had our special envoy for climate change, John Kerry, former Secretary of State, had a conversation with Prime Minister Anwar in May, so that maybe that was one of the things that contributed. But we consider that a big success, taking Malaysia, to a new position in terms of really addressing the climate crisis, which the United States is struggling with as well. It's truly a global issue that nobody can ignore it.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, how do you navigate complexities within the region here, in Asia perhaps, with the aim to strengthen both U.S.-Malaysia relations? From the perspective of regional stability, Malaysia has had her up and downs in the past few years with multiple change of hands in terms of prime ministers and so on. But also considering that Malaysia is strategically located from a geolocation. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think from Washington's point of view, Malaysia is seen as one of the founding partners in ASEAN and one of the strongest players in ASEAN. So I think we look to Malaysia on very difficult issues that frankly nobody has been able to resolve. But Malaysia has been a leader on issues like Burma. I think the world community wants Burma to get back on the track of democracy that it was on. Yeah. Hold legitimate elections, release the political prisoners. Malaysia has been trying to do that. I have to say without a lot of success, but that's because of the situation in Burma. Within ASEAN, I think we see Malaysia as playing a very constructive role in terms of the further economic integration. Every year there's something that happens in terms of there's a new way to pay across all the states of ASEAN that there wasn't last year. So Malaysia is part of that continued progress in terms of integration, economically and politically. And I think we also see Malaysia as a leader, particularly leader in the region beyond ASEAN. You have a prime minister who has high world recognition. I think when Prime Minister Anwar speaks, people listen. So when he makes comments about the need for peace and stability in the world, I think that will really register at places like the United Nations.
Yeah, you've had your focus on Southeast Asia as well, being here in Malaysia. What importance do you place on issues like diversity and inclusivity? That is a daily discussion here in Malaysia, but it's also the fabric of how we are in this country, multiracial and
right.
harmonious.
I think that's one of the things that the United States and Malaysia have in common. We are both multicultural societies. We both have our challenges, probably different challenges, but significant challenges. It's become a huge issue in the United States, also inside the State Department. I've been a State Department officer for 32 years. We are doing our best, all ambassadors and all senior members of the State Department team, we're trying to do our best to make sure that when we recruit for the team that's coming here to Malaysia, we put diversity on the top of the list. And we do have a diverse team, so I'm proud of what we've done, but we're always trying to give more opportunities for women and minorities and make sure that there's, because studies have shown that diverse teams are also better performing teams. So it's not only, the right thing to do, but it's a helpful thing to do. So we put a lot of emphasis on it. I think Malaysia has a lot of strengths because of its diversity, right? You're multicultural.
Right.
People can come here and learn all about different cultures just in one place.
But what do you think Malaysia should prioritize to further promote diversity and inclusivity? While it is something almost innate, it is also a challenging concept in some sectors.
I mean, I think it's up to the Malaysians to deal with that. I wouldn't try to come in as an outsider. I would just say that in the United States and our dealings with Malaysia, we make sure that when we recruit for various scholarship programs and things like that, we have an understanding in the embassy that we're going to go to all the geographic regions of Malaysia, and we're going to recruit from both genders. We're trying to make sure that all of our programs that have to do with Malaysia are diverse. And then I think it's up to the Malaysian government, the Malaysian people to sort of decide how to deal with the issue internally.
What key takeaways would you take from your experience here in Malaysia in terms of key practices or strategies that you think would be suitable or adaptable back in the US? Oh,
that's a great question. There's so much that we can learn. I think Malaysia, your tourism sector. There's so many ways that Malaysia promotes its tourism sector. Sabah is so different from Langkawi, is so different from Penang, and all that. And that I think you or whoever does your tourism campaigns has a way of sort of painting the picture of Malaysia that we could probably learn a lot from. On the democracy side, you have high participation in your elections. I think the United States, we sometimes struggle to get enough people to come out to vote just because of apathy. So I think we could learn from you. How do you keep that level of voter interest up? And then you have as you were mentioning before, you have a very successful high tech economy in terms of some of the latest technologies coming here. I think U.S. companies come here and they invest in Malaysia, but then they learn a lot from Malaysia. There was one company, I guess I won't name a particular company to keep things balanced, but there's one U.S. company here that has on its staff about 40 or 50 Malaysians, each of whom has earned a patent. Mm-hmm. So that becomes part of the intellectual property of the company, but it's because of Malaysian brain power. So we have a lot to gain from Malaysia.
What would you say to address concerns of your allies here in the region or even in Malaysia regarding US's approach towards developing countries? And would you like to offer a different perspective on this matter? Because there are very many experts, perhaps, who weigh in to say that US takes a hawkish approach.
In terms of our assistance to developing countries, or
yes.
Boy, I'm not sure. I mean, Malaysia is a high middle income country, so we don't have the programs that we have in some countries. In many countries, including Indonesia, where I served before, we have a U.S. Agency for International Development, and they're the main ones that do development type assistance. But I don't think it's a hawkish approach as much as it's a needs based approach. I mean, I'll just talk about Indonesia since they do have a program. In Indonesia, there's a kind of elaborate 5-year program that's worked out with the government. It's like, how much are we going to do on health? How much are we going to do on water sanitation? How much are we going to do on? They have a big program on tuberculosis. Like things that have been identified as areas that need additional help. I think that's the way we do our development assistance. But if I'm missing something, let me know.
No, I mean, there are concerns perhaps that the U.S. is, or perhaps, for lack of a better word, are perhaps forceful in their sharing of strategy, or perhaps development of plans. And what I have picked up is that, and which is why I posted the question to you, and I wonder if that is perhaps something media has tried to shape, or is that something the US feels that they need to do to contribute or help developing nations?
Yeah, I think probably the area where I can shed any light would be Malaysia, where I've worked intensively not only these 3 years, but I worked here 3 years previously. So in the case of the dialogue between the United States and Malaysia, we have various levels of dialogue. Our Secretary of State came here in December of 2021 and had meetings with the Foreign Minister and the Minister of Environment. That's the highest level that we've had, right? Eventually, President Biden will meet Prime Minister Anwar, and that will be even higher. But we have the dialogues at those level, and then there's outcomes from those. Like when Secretary of State Blinken came here in December 2021, right. He said, let's work together on renewable energy and climate issues. And then here we are 2.5 years later. People like me have been doing that ever since, right? So that's kind of, it starts with a dialogue saying, what are you interested in? What are your needs? What have we been doing in the past that works well? So it's just kind of, that's the way that I've experienced it. So I don't know if there's any other agenda beyond that, but that's the way I've seen it.
Your Excellency, what would you say to your successor?
Oh, sure, yeah. I think it's very important to take this work forward. Malaysia and the United States, the relations have kept going stronger. There's more areas that we work on cybersecurity. We work on health issues more than we have in the past. I think I would say to my successor, it's a challenge to keep all the balls in the air, but we have a great team. I think that the thing that I would say to my successor is the embassy team, both the U.S. direct hires and the local nationals, they really know, you can really rely on them. You can go to them and say, what should we be doing in the cybersecurity area? What should we be doing with the Maritime Enforcement Agency? And the staff, especially the local staff who have these long-term, they've been in Malaysia, they're from birth, so they know a lot. I think we can really rely on them to make sure that we keep heading in the right direction.
And what's next for you?
So I'm getting ready to finish my State Department career. I've been in it 32 years, and I'm going to retire and work for a business organization. So
back in the region?
Back in the region, yeah. So
all right.
Looking forward to staying out here in some way.
So we may see you walking around the beaches
right.
of Malaysia
That's
soon.
That's right, yeah.
If you could describe Malaysia upon your exit in 3 words, and if you could indulge me by speaking in Bahasa, that would be nice.
Oh, okay. Well, I better pick easy words if I'm using Bahasa. Okay, so I would say first it would be makanan. Yeah.
Makan.
Ada makanan dari mana-mana di sini. Makanan khas.
You will miss the makan.
I will miss them. I miss the makanan.
Right.
So food would be one. Kebudayaan. I think like I said, my friends who came here, friends that I've known for 30 years, came to Malaysia a few weeks ago, and they said, we had no idea of the diversity, and the different cultures, so they were going to, all kinds of different shows and everything. So that's one. And then, sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the Malaysian word, but nature, just the beauty of nature, Mount Kinabalu and things like that, and the coral reefs and everything. So I think those would be the 3 things that would stay with me.
Wonderful. Your Excellency, thank you very much for all that you've done here in Malaysia, but also for making time to speak to me today. It has been a pleasure. We wish you the very best.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, we've reached the end of today's episode. Thank you, of course, for being with us as well. That has been my insightful conversation with His Excellency, and is, of course, giving us a deeper understanding between the state of affairs between the US and Malaysia, and the efforts that are being made constantly to strengthen our ties. Of course, this is The Nation. I'm Jessy Chahal. Do keep it locked on Tribunama for more coming your way. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. It was a great chat.